Before the headlines, before the hashtags, before the heartbreak and the search of the bodycam footage, there was just Gabby Petito. Gabrielle Venora Petito was born on March 19, 1999. She was a big sister, a bright soul, a kid who loved art and travel and chasing light through canyon walls. Her family called her a free spirit. And that spirit? Well, you could see it in everything she did. In her sketches, her smile, the way she moved through the world with both hands open. In 2017, Gabby graduated from Bayport Blue Point High School on Long Island. That same year, she met Brian Laundrie. The two of them started dating in 2019, and not long after, she moved into his family's house in Northport, Florida. They worked together at the local market, Gabby in the pharmacy, Brian in groceries, until the pandemic shut that chapter down. But Gabby was already dreaming bigger. She just launched a travel vlog called Nomadic Statik. She wanted to show the world what it looked like to live in a van, to sleep under the stars, and to adventure with the one you love. And in the summer of 2021, she finally hit the road. She and Brian packed up her white Ford Transit and set off west, documenting national parks, sunrise hikes, and van life snapshots for her Instagram. Her voiceovers were gentle, her footage quiet and beautiful. She was hopeful, radiant, excited. They left Blue Point for the last time on July 2nd and hit the road hard. Monument Rocks by the 5th, Colorado Springs on the 8th, Great Sand Dunes, Zion, Bryce Canyon, Canyonlands. Each new stop a postcard. But somewhere along that open highway, something broke, and Gabby, she never came home. What happened next would capture the nation's attention, ignite debates about domestic violence, media bias, and online sleuthing. But in order to understand what went wrong, we have to go back. We have to rewind the tape, not just to the search or the van or the police stop, but to who Gabby was by the end of August 2021, and how a dream road trip turned into an unthinkable tragedy. This is the story of the final days of Gabby Petito. On August 12, 2021, police in Moab, Utah responded to a report of a van driving erratically through a low-speed zone. An officer clocked it at 45 miles per hour, 30 over the posted limit, before it hopped a curb. The driver pulled over, and inside were two people, Brian Laundrie and his fiancée, Gabby Petito.
You want to place your vehicle into park and go ahead and turn it off for me?
Yeah, sure.
No, park?
Oh, it isn't park yet.
Okay, turn off your engine. Go ahead and set your keys on the dash for me, all right? What's your guys' names?
Gabby.
I'm Brian.
Gabby, Brian? Okay. What's going on? How come you're crying?
I'm just sorry. We've just been fighting this morning. Some personal issues.
It was a long day. We were camping yesterday, and camping got stuff, flies and stuff. I'm sorry I hit the bump there.
I was distracting him from driving. I'm sorry.
Can I get you to step out of the vehicle for me?
Gabby was crying almost immediately. She told officers they'd been arguing, that she had OCD, that she was overwhelmed by the pressures of travel, her vlog, and the anxiety she'd been trying to suppress. She took the blame for the erratic driving, saying she was distracting Brian, apologized, explained, tried to downplay the situation. When the officers separated the couple, Gabby opened up a little more, saying she had anxiety, that she was working on herself, and that the two of them had been at odds since stopping at a coffee shop earlier in the day.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just some days I have really bad OCD, and I was just cleaning and straightening up the back of the van before, and I was apologizing to him and saying, I'm sorry that I'm so mean, because sometimes I have OCD and sometimes I just get really frustrated. Not like mean towards him, I just like, I guess my vibe is like, I am like in a bad mood.
Brian, she said, was frustrated, and she admitted to touching the wheel. Not to take control, but in reaction to the police lights behind them. Brian, for his part, corroborated most of the timeline. He said Gabby had been upset about the state of the van and the dirt on his feet, that she'd scratched him with her phone when he tried to lock the car and walk away. He wasn't angry about it, he said, wasn't complaining. He had visible marks on his face and arm, but brushed them off as nothing. We love each other, he said. We're just stressed.
We really had a nice morning with anything, but she just got worked up as we were trying to get going and get our day going because we want to go hike arches before the sun goes down.
Okay. You want to tell me about those scratches on your face?
She had a cell phone in her hand. That's why I was pushing her away, because she wanted. I locked the keys so I could walk away. I said, let's just take a breather and let's not, go anywhere. Let's just calm down for a minute. She was getting a little worked up, and then she had her phone and was trying to get the keys from me, so I got in the way. I was just trying to. I know I shouldn't push, but I was just trying to push her away to go. Let's just take a minute, step back, and breathe. And she got me with her phone.
They both told the officers the same story. They were traveling across the country. They'd started in Florida and were making their way to Oregon, living in the van, documenting the trip. And the officers didn't see a clear aggressor. They did note the emotion, the scratches, the general chaos of the scene, but nothing that pointed to malicious intent. Just two people caught in the middle of something they didn't know how to navigate. As the initial chaos settled, the officers stepped aside and started doing what officers are trained to do: assess, categorize, and follow protocol. It didn't take long for them to make a decision. According to their observations and a nearby witness, it was Gabby who'd struck Brian. The witness described Brian trying to separate himself from the situation, locking Gabby out of the van, but with Gabby forcing her way back in. He also recalled seeing Brian shove her, though it wasn't clear whether it was aggression or defense. From the officer's shoddy perspective, it looked like defense. And that mattered, because under Utah law, domestic incidents involving cohabitating partners with visible injuries requires action. And Brian's injuries, however minor, were visible. Gabby admitted to hitting him, and Brian confirmed it. But he told the officers he didn't want to press charges. He just wanted to move on, to keep her out of trouble. But that wasn't his call. The officers had to act. The only options were to arrest Gabby or find a way to keep them separated for the night. They chose the latter. Brian, emotional but compliant, made it clear that he did not want her punished, that he loved her, that this whole thing had gotten way out of hand. But then, he let his first signs of suspicious activity slip.
I don't think CCAM will take it with the aggressor.
No.
There's a women's shelter.
I'm curious.
You can find out. Say, hey, she doesn't have where to go.
If you did the citation, say she drove off in she could drive off in this car.
We could give you a ride somewhere.
Then I got my backpack. Sucks for you.
I got my backpack.
You can spend the night.
You want to drive me to Delicate Art?
Does she have a good driver's license?
She's a driver's license, yeah.
Trust her with your vehicle?
Yeah, she can help.
Well, then you'd kind of be homeless for the night.
And man, I can't talk to her at all.
Well,
and I've got to do the thing, so I can't go camping.
we can tell her what it is that she needs to do to get through all this, and then let her know what your plan is.
Brian kept trying to shield her, insisting he didn't have a phone, minimizing what happened, even offering alternative explanations for why he was scratched up. But the officers had heard that before. They told him plainly, they weren't trying to ruin either of their lives. They were trying to prevent something worse. Gabby would stay with the van. Brian would be put up in a hotel, courtesy of a local victim advocacy group. No contact, just one night apart to cool off. They told Brian he'd have to sign a waiver to remove the no contact order, but not until after Gabby's court date. That's just how the law works. Brian understood and thanked them. The officers reassured him. He wasn't in trouble. He was a good guy. He did the right thing. Hindsight is disturbingly 2020. As the stop drew to a close, the officers made their decision official. Gabby would not be cited for domestic violence. No charges, no arrest, but they would in fact be separated for the night. Gabby was visibly shaken, but the officers tried to calm her. They told her she was, quote, coming out of this as the golden flower, unquote, that she needed to take a deep breath, eat something, maybe call her parents.
For both of you guys the same. From what you told me and what he told me, you guys have a bunch of little things that are building up, and finally the little string that you guys were tight walking on broke tonight. Does that sound about right? So, I just want everybody to breathe, get a chance away from each other, go eat a meal, talk to your parents, whatever it is you gotta do.
In here?
Brian had a hotel room lined up through that victim services. Gabby would keep the van. They weren't allowed to text or wave or send messages, unless it was an emergency. But the two still found a way to speak through the officers. Gabby told them to tell Brian she loved him and that she couldn't wait to see him tomorrow. Brian sent the same message back. The officers promised they'd be reunited soon and that this was just a breather, nothing more. The footage becomes more relaxed in these final minutes. The officer and Brian start talking about marriage, about stress, about what it's like to feel stuck inside a small place with someone you love. He even opens up about his own wife's struggles with anxiety and how medication changed everything.
Well, I will say this. When my wife got put onto medication, within a week, I saw a complete turnaround in her attitude, her demeanor. I mean, she wasn't nearly as aggressive or angry or anything like that. It was a considerable difference in her day-to-day life. It made her quality of life better even. You know what I mean?
No, I know what you're saying.
And it's made my quality of life a lot better too, because I don't have her being as stressed. I know that 5.5 years of marriage, I know it's not very long, but at the same time, you learn a lot in the first 5 years.
It comes across as a very human moment. Just two men talking late at night, right? Trying to find common ground. You know, they talk about road trips, favorite places, Yosemite, Sequoia, long drives through nowhere. It's the first time all day anyone sounded at peace. But the tension never really leaves the air. Gabby, well, nobody was thinking about Gabby. She was alone, sleeping in the van that night. Brian was alone in his hotel room. And the officers, seemingly well-intentioned, yet obtuse to the obvious warning signs that Brian wasn't to be trusted, believed they had de-escalated a domestic dispute. The second body cam, captured from a different angle and officer perspective, doesn't add much that's new, but it does deepen the context. We hear more from the officers, more from the witnesses, and more from Gabby. We see a little clearer how the officers reached their decision and what they were up against. Throughout, the officers debate what doing the right thing even means. One calls Gabby a tiny little girl, 105 pounds soaking wet, full of anxiety.
But is there a way to not do anything on something like this? I mean, it's so minor. It's hard to say, right? I'm going to go reread the statute and just see if it fits or if there's a way it doesn't fit, and if I can find a way that, because it really is this, the spirit of the law is being lost on this one. It really is. So let me see what I can find, and if nothing else, then we'll have to separate them whether she likes it or not. All right, thanks. Bye. Thanks. Bye.
Another says it doesn't feel like a case where Brian is a battered man, but that all the evidence still falls into the legal definition of domestic assault. They walk through the logic, the process, and the moral calculus of the moment. They cite, they separate, they try to help. Regrettably though, it would not be enough, because what they didn't know was that they just documented the last major public interaction between Gabby Petito and law enforcement, and allowed a mentally unwell young man turned murderer free to carry out his evil bidding. Gabby's Instagram upload on August 12th, the same day as the traffic stop, feels off. It shows her and Brian smiling at Delicate Arch, photos likely taken a few days earlier on August 9th. The scenery is stunning. The smiles look real, but the caption raises red flags. First, she tags Brian's handle, @bizarre_design_, multiple times. It's forced, overcompensating, like she's trying to sell the idea of their partnership, not just share it. Second, the caption itself reads more like a press release than a travel diary. She writes about Brian climbing steep slopes, helping strangers, getting a thumbs up from someone nearby. There's a strange heroism to the tone. Brian is the competent, kind protector. The kind of language that feels defensive, even fearful, like she's trying to preempt something, or convince herself, or someone else. Then there's the disclaimer language. Rock climbing is dangerous. Don't try this at home. We're experienced. It's oddly formal, uncharacteristic, almost like a legal waiver shoved into the middle of a scrapbook. And finally, the post ends with an out-of-nowhere detail. A stranger they helped off a cliff hit Gabby with his walking stick. The line is buried at the bottom of the caption, but it jumps off the screen. Gabby, the one who may have been suffering physical abuse behind closed doors, is the one who gets hit. The irony is hard to ignore. Again, it's unclear whether this post came before or after the police stop in Moab, but either way, it doesn't sit right. 5 days later, on August 17th, Brian flies home. He leaves Gabby behind in Salt Lake City, where she stays at the Fairfield Inn near the airport. Hotel staff later confirmed she was there alone for several days. Brian's lawyer would later explain that the flight was to retrieve items from a shared storage unit. He says the tickets were paid for by both Gabby and Brian. He says it was about saving money, so they could keep traveling. But what we know for sure is that Brian left and Gabby stayed. And somewhere during that same stretch of days, just outside Moab, the bodies of Kylan Schulte and Crystal Turner were found at a campsite. The couple had gone missing after telling friends about a creepy guy bothering them. Theories swirled. Was there a connection? Police would later rule it out. Separate case, separate tragedy. But the timing was impossible to ignore. Gabby Petito, isolated, anxious, already in danger, was now physically alone in a state that she didn't call home. On August 19th, while Gabby was still holed up alone in the Salt Lake City hotel, a new video quietly dropped on the YouTube channel Nomadic Statik. It was titled Van Life, Beginning Our Van Life Journey. Just 8 minutes long, it's the only video ever posted to the channel, and what it captures is almost too perfect. The video is calm, dreamlike, set to gentle music with sparse voiceover. It's a travel diary built more around mood than story. Brian and Gabby are shown smiling, stretching, eating yogurt, lounging in the van. Gabby makes a joke about chocolate melting in the Utah sun, teases Brian about his granola, and speaks lovingly about their campsite outside Capitol Reef. At one point, she says it's one of their favorite spots so far, and her voice, for once, sounds totally at peace. She mentions her hammock, says she's only used it once since leaving New York, but finally found 2 trees to hang it between. It's a small detail, one that might not stand out in any other context, but here, in hindsight, it lands differently, as if she knew this moment might not come again. The vlog ends with more landscape shots and no conclusion. No closing remarks, just silence and sky. It's serene, it's beautiful, and it's a lie. Because what most viewers wouldn't know, not then at least, is that Gabby wasn't traveling when this was uploaded. She was sitting alone in a Fairfield Inn near the Salt Lake Airport, hundreds of miles from the freedom this video sells. Brian had flown back to Florida, supposedly to close that storage unit. And Gabby, she was just waiting. That same day, she posted again to Instagram. It's another oddly distant upload. Photos pulled from a story she'd already shared over a month earlier. The caption is vague. Brian is tagged again, but there's no geotag, no new details, and no real context. For Gabby, this kind of reposting was rare. It feels like she's trying to maintain an illusion, or maybe just fill the silence. Either way, something had changed. Whatever piece she'd captured on camera was long gone, and the clock was ticking. On August 27, 2021, Gabby and Brian were back on the road, reunited after Brian's Florida detour. And by all accounts, not doing well. That afternoon, just past 1:00 p.m., a commotion broke out inside the Mary Piglet's Tex-Mex restaurant in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Eyewitness Nina Angelo, in town for a wedding, says she watched Brian lose his temper at the hostess, screaming, flailing, drawing eyes. Gabby was reportedly in tears, apologizing over and over again for his behavior. The restaurant has since confirmed that the couple was very likely there. Roughly 30 minutes later, surveillance footage captured the two of them arriving at a Whole Foods nearby. The video, time-stamped at 2:11 p.m., shows their Ford Transit van pulling into the parking lot. 3 minutes later, they walk calmly inside. At first glance, there's nothing alarming. Gabby and Brian both move with purpose, heads low, not speaking. They aren't affectionate, but they aren't openly hostile either. Still, the video takes on a much darker tone with hindsight. Watch closely. Gabby keeps her arms crossed tightly across her chest. Brian walks ahead, hands in his pockets. There's no eye contact, no physical contact, no shared conversation. Gabby carries all the bags, and Brian doesn't even hold the door. Some have tried to excuse it. Maybe she was cold. Maybe they were tired. Maybe nothing was wrong. But that kind of stillness, the distance between them, the silence in their posture, felt familiar to people who've lived through abusive relationships. Survivors recognized that hunched-over gait, that closed-off body language, that quiet deflation. In hindsight, many saw it for what it probably was: Gabby trying not to rock the boat. They left the store at 2:30 p.m. At 2:56, they drove off toward the Bridger-Teton National Forest. What happened in those 25 minutes between checkout and the ignition is a blank space. But we know what came next, and the realization that this grainy, quiet footage captures Gabby's final hours alive, it's unbearable. Viewers pored over the footage when it was released, some in mourning, some in outrage. The horror wasn't just that she was killed, it was the familiarity, the way this looked so normal until it wasn't. Women across social media shared their own stories. Former partners, near escapes, red flags that looked like nothing to outsiders. And a lot of people asked the same question: how could no one see it coming? But some people did. Some people saw the way he talked over her, the way she apologized for things that were not her fault, the way he controlled the narrative, what they ate, how they lived, where they went. What this footage captured wasn't just the last time Gabby Petito was seen alive. It captured what abuse looks like when no one's looking. It captured the silence, the shrinking, the gap between fear and confrontation. It captured everything we've been taught to ignore. The last confirmed sighting of Gabby Petito was August 27th. That same day, her mother, Nicole Schmidt, received what would turn out to be the last text ever sent from Gabby's phone. It read, "Can you help Stan? I just keep getting his voicemails and missed calls." Stan was Gabby's grandfather, but she never called him that. She never referred to him by his first name, not in conversation, not in writing, not once. Nicole immediately knew something was off. Something was wrong. One thing was for sure. That text was not from Gabby. And it wasn't just the wording, it was the timing. That message came in the wake of the Mary Piglets fight, the Whole Foods footage, the 25-minute blackout window before the van pulled away towards the Bridger Teton. It was Gabby's last known communication with anyone outside that van. After that, silence. No Instagram posts, no check-ins, just digital quiet. Then, 2 days later, another strange ripple. On August 29th, Brian Laundrie reportedly called his mother. Nothing about that was unusual, until the end of the call, when his tone changed abruptly. Whatever he said on the other end of the line, Brian hung up and told his father, flatly, "Gabby's gone." He added that he might need a lawyer, and there was no explanation, no further context. Just that. Gabby's gone. The next day, another text is sent from Gabby's phone. No service in Yosemite. Her mother didn't buy it. Not just because Gabby had never mentioned a trip to Yosemite, not just because the wording felt cold and unlike her again, but because she knew her daughter, and this was not her. That same day, someone transfers $700 from Gabby's account to Brian's. The message attached to the transaction? A casual, vague goodbye. Widely believed to be another one of Brian's calculated moves to fabricate an alibi. Within the next 24 hours, more money is withdrawn from Gabby's debit card, over $1,000. Later, this theft would form the basis of a federal arrest warrant, one of the few clear charges ever brought against Brian Laundrie before the case turned fatal. On September 1st, Brian Laundrie returned to Northport, Florida. He drove the van home, alone. Again, no Gabby. No explanation. No contact with her family. Just silence. He parked the van in his parents' driveway, went inside, and said nothing. And then, 5 days later, the Laundrie family went camping? In a bizarre twist, on September 6th and 7th, Brian's parents took him to Fort DeSoto Park, a quiet coastal campground about 75 miles from their home. They pitched a tent. They cooked meals. They watched the water. And the man who just returned from a road trip without his fiancée slept under the stars like nothing had happened. It wasn't until September 11th, 2 full weeks after Gabby's last known communication, that her family officially reported her missing, because the silence had become too loud to ignore. By then, Brian was already hunkered down, off the grid, and disappearing forever fast. As a result, it was up to the rest of the world to help find Gabby Petito. On September 13th, Brian Laundrie quietly left his family's home in Northport, Florida. His parents told police he was heading to the T. Mabry Carlton Reserve, a vast stretch of swamp and brushland near their neighborhood. Law enforcement was already keeping an eye on the Laundrie residence by then, and they confirmed seeing Brian leave. But that would be the last time anyone could say with certainty they'd seen him alive. 2 days later, on September 15th, Brian was officially named a person of interest in Gabby Petito's disappearance. His parents stopped cooperating. They hired an attorney, Steve Bertolino, and invoked their right to remain silent. That same day, surveillance footage captured someone getting out of the family's Mustang and walking into the house. At the time, police believed it was Brian returning, But it wasn't. It was his mother wearing a baseball cap. That mistake would cost them. On September 17th, Brian Laundrie was reported missing by his parents. They claimed they hadn't seen him since September 13th, 4 days earlier. And just like that, the only person of interest in a national missing persons case had vanished. It was only then that law enforcement realized they had mistaken Roberta Laundrie for her son on the 15th. Brian had slipped away, under their noses, again. That same day, the first viral witness account landed on TikTok, turning the tides of the investigation.
Hi, my name is Miranda Baker, and on August 29th, my boyfriend and I picked up Brian at Grand Teton National Park at 5:30 at night at Coulter Bay.
Her name was Miranda Baker. She and her boyfriend had been driving through Grand Teton National Park on August 29th when they picked up a hitchhiker near Coulter Bay. The hitchhiker in question was Brian Laundrie. He offered them $200 for a ride, an absurd amount considering he only needed to go about 10 miles.
But before he came in the car, he offered to pay us like $200 to give him a ride, like 10 miles. So that was kind of weird.
During the drive, Brian told them he'd been camping alone for days. Gabby, he claimed, was back at their van working on their social media page. But something wasn't right. When Miranda mentioned that they were headed to Jackson, Wyoming, Brian's demeanor changed. Suddenly, he panicked, insisted they stop, said he needed to get out immediately. They dropped him off near Jackson Dam at exactly 6:09 p.m.
Then once, like, in conversation I brought up, yep, like, we're going to Jackson, he freaked out. He's like, nope, I need to get out right now, like, pull over. So we pulled over at the Jackson Dam, which I don't know if you know, like, Teton Park, but it's not very far from Coulter Bay. He kind of, like, hurried out of the car, and then he's like, okay, I'm just gonna go find someone else to, hitchhike. And we're like, okay. It was a weird situation.
Miranda noted he didn't look dirty, didn't smell like someone who had been camping. He was clean, calm, and carrying nothing but a backpack and a tarp. For a guy who supposedly spent days in the wilderness, it didn't add up. And the story he gave, camping along the Snake River while Gabby stayed behind, wasn't just suspicious, it was a lie. On September 19th, the same day Gabby's body was discovered, 2 more key witness accounts surfaced online, this time on TikTok and YouTube, and both point back to one crucial location: Spread Creek Dispersed Camping Area. The first came from a TikTok user who goes by Jessica Over Yonder. According to her, she saw Brian Laundrie alone in the white van near Spread Creek on August 26th. She describes his behavior as awkward and confused. There was no sign of Gabby.
So I saw Brian Laundrie parking his van August 26th at Spread Creek. So I'd already reported to the FBI what I had seen, I wasn't 100% sure, but now that there's dash cam footage of the van where I saw it, I'm 100% certain that I did see him parking his van, and he was very kind of awkward and confused, and it was just him. There was no Gabby, but that's only because as a van lifer, I was checking out their van, and I was checking out to see if it was a couple or a solo dude. So it was a solo dude as far as I could see, unless she was in the back somewhere. But when I pulled up, he was driving still and hadn't yet pulled over. So I was like, hey, what are you going to do? Are you going to get over? Or are you going to let me pass? Because it's only one car width of a road. And he kind of pulled over like halfway and made me drive out of the road to go around him. So I thought it was just really weird.
Jessica says she wasn't completely sure what she saw at first, but after dashcam footage emerged showing the van parked in the same exact spot, her doubts disappeared. She now says she's 100% certain it was Brian. He'd parked that van in such a strange way, halfway into the road, forcing Jessica to drive around it, that the moment stuck in her head. As a fellow van lifer, she checked to see if the vehicle looked like it belonged to a solo traveler or a couple. From her perspective, it was just him. She later shared this with the FBI, and according to her, one agent told her the tip helped them locate Gabby's remains. The second account came from the Bethune family, Jen and Kyle, who posted a vlog-style update on YouTube after realizing their dash cam had captured something critical. On August 27th, around 6 o'clock p.m., the Bethunes were driving through Spread Creek when they passed the white Ford Transit van with Florida plates. They thought about stopping to say hi. Van lifers tend to be friendly, but the vehicle looked empty and dark. Something didn't feel right, so they kept driving. Nearly 3 weeks later, while reviewing their footage, Jen says she got a bone-deep chill when she saw the van in their video. She ran to her laptop, rewatched the clip, and confirmed it. It was Gabby and Brian's van, parked at what would become a crime scene. The clip was turned over to the FBI and helped investigators zero in on Gabby's last known location. Between Jessica's eyewitness account on the 26th and the Bethune's footage on the 27th, Spread Creek became the flashpoint in this case. 2 witnesses, 2 dates, 1 van. But still, no Gabby. Then, on September 19th, the search came to an end. Gabby Petito's body was discovered near the Spread Creek dispersed camping area in Wyoming, that same place where 2 witnesses had previously placed Brian Laundrie in the van alone. The same place where dashcam footage caught the vehicle abandoned. The same place Laundrie reportedly insisted on being dropped off before the road turned to gravel. Her body was found not far from that gate. An autopsy later confirmed what many already feared. Gabby was murdered, blunt force trauma to the head and neck, manual strangulation. The coroner estimated her time of death as 3 to 4 weeks before the discovery, meaning she likely died the same day she was last seen, August 27th. By now, the country was watching, and they were watching hard. Just 2 days after her body was found, a grainy trail cam image went viral. Posted from Okaloosa County, Florida, it showed what appeared to be a man resembling Brian Laundrie walking alone through the woods with a backpack. Deputies searched the area, including ground units and aerial surveillance, but nothing came of it. Turns out, it wasn't Brian, just a lookalike hiker. But in a case like this, where one man has gone missing just days after his fiancée is found dead in the woods, every shadow starts to look like him. Then, on September 23rd, things got even more serious. A federal arrest warrant was issued for Brian Laundrie. Not for murder, not yet, but for unauthorized use of Gabby's debit card. Between August 30th and September 1st, it was now proven that Laundrie did withdraw more than $1,000 using her account. The FBI also collected DNA from his family home during this period. And then, another witness stepped forward. Norma Jean Jolovic, a local resident in the area, told People magazine that she picked up Laundrie hitchhiking near Jackson Lake Dam on August 29th, right after he bailed from Miranda Baker's car. He told her the same story. Gabby was back at the van working on their blog, and he was hiking the Snake River. He even shared some wildlife sightings: moose, elk, bison. But when they approached the Spread Creek turnoff, he got jumpy. Norma offered to drive him past the gate and into the camping area, but Laundrie suddenly insisted, loudly, that she stop and let him out immediately. She says he was practically climbing out of the car before she even hit the brakes. She dropped him off around 6:40 p.m. That places Brian Laundrie, yet again, back at the site where Gabby's body would be discovered, just 2 days after her final text, and just hours after that eerie Whole Foods footage. Norma didn't think much of it at the time. He was scruffy, maybe a little smelly, but looked like any other young guy trying to catch a ride. It wasn't until she saw Miranda Baker's viral TikTok almost 3 weeks later that the weight of what she'd witnessed came crashing down. Looking back, she said it plainly. Now we all know, obviously, there was a reason why he probably didn't want me to go down that road. By early October, the Laundrie family could no longer avoid the camera flashes or the mounting pressure. On October 5th, Brian's sister, Cassie Laundrie, finally broke her silence. She spoke publicly for the first time, directly urging her brother to surrender. The language was brief but pointed, and in the court of public opinion, it was far too late. 2 days later, Brian's father joined the official manhunt, walking through the thick Florida brush alongside investigators at the T. Mabry Carlton Reserve and the nearby Myakkahatchee Creek Environmental Park. These were spots Brian knew well: hiking trails, swamps, remote corners. He'd been there before. And by then, everyone was asking the same question. Was he hiding or already dead? On October 20th, we got the answer. Searchers discovered skeletal remains at Myakkahatchee. The area had recently flooded, which may explain why earlier searches came up empty. Near the bones was a dry bag, a backpack, and a notebook. Dental records confirmed it. Brian Laundrie was dead. A forensic anthropologist later determined he'd died by a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. That notebook would prove to be the final chapter. Inside, Brian confessed to killing Gabby. He claimed it was to end her pain, that she was suffering. He offered no evidence, no medical explanation, just a final story, written on his own terms. He admitted to sending fake texts from Gabby's phone, an effort to mislead investigators and buy himself time. In June of 2022, the Laundrie family attorney released the full contents of Brian's notebook. It was water damaged, barely legible in parts, but what we got, what we were allowed to see, was 8 pages of unfiltered confession. 8 pages of Brian Laundrie's final words, written by flashlight in the middle of the Florida wilderness, somewhere between self-pity, delusion, and the beginnings of rot. The first few pages are romanticized. Brian addresses Gabby directly. He talks about wishing he could relive their memories, lying awake thinking of nights they spent under the stars, laughing, hiking, watching sunsets from the roof of their van. He describes his regret, his grief, his inability to go on without her. He says things like, "I can't live without you and I will always love you." At face value, these might sound like the tortured scribblings of a man in mourning, but we know better. Then he turns to the story. He claims Gabby's death was an accident, that she slipped into a freezing stream in the Tetons, hit her head, became disoriented, and collapsed, that she was shaking and gasping and begging for an end to the pain. Then he lit a fire and held her through the night, trying to warm her, that she went in and out of consciousness, and that he killed her out of mercy. That's the story he wanted to leave behind. But none of it makes sense, and more importantly, none of it matches the autopsy. Gabby Petito died from blunt force trauma and manual strangulation. There was no water in her lungs, no evidence of hypothermia, just violence and silence. Later in the notebook, Brian admits to panicking. He says he couldn't live with what he did, that he rushed home to see his family one last time, that he contemplated suicide by friend, considering letting people like his friends TJ or James kill him in revenge. But he lied, excusing it by saying he didn't want to put that weight on them. Instead, he wandered into the reserve and ended his own life by the creek. And then comes the most twisted part of all. "I have killed myself by this creek," he writes, "in the hopes that animals may tear me apart, that it may make some of her family happy." He signs off by asking someone, anyone, to collect his things. Gabby hated people who litter. Even in his final breath, Brian Laundrie could not resist trying to write the ending himself, not with the truth, but with control, A story full of contradictions, self-preservation, and a desperate attempt to paint himself as both the heartbroken lover and the reluctant villain. But none of it changes the outcome. Gabby Petito is dead, in cold blood. Her voice was taken, her future stolen, and the notebook, for all its drama and denial, is just another reminder of how long she was silenced. First in life, then in death. On January 21st, 2022, the FBI announced the case was officially closed. There would be no trial, no courtroom, no cross-examination. Just a family, friends, and their country left to make sense of the grief that followed. The aftermath of Gabby Petito's murder didn't end when her remains were discovered. For her family and for the millions who followed her story in real time, the grief stretched into courtrooms, interviews, settlement paperwork, and lawsuits, each one trying to answer the same question. How could this have been prevented? In November of 2022, a $3 million judgment was awarded to Gabby's estate in a wrongful death suit filed against Brian Laundrie's estate. It was mostly symbolic. Everyone understood the Laundrie family didn't have that kind of money. But it was about principle, the acknowledgement on record that Gabby's life was taken unlawfully, and that the man responsible would never stand trial. Her parents also filed suit against Brian's parents and their attorney, Steve Bertolino, for emotional distress. They accused them of withholding crucial information while pretending not to know what had happened to Gabby. That case was eventually settled under sealed terms. But to the Petito family, the emotional betrayal was already public. More controversially, Gabby's parents filed a $50 million wrongful death lawsuit against the Moab Police Department, zeroing in on that fateful traffic stop in Utah. Specifically, they alleged that Officer Eric Pratt failed to follow domestic violence protocols and ignored clear red flags that could have saved their daughter's life. They cited the department's own lethality assessment protocol and accused them of violating it. On November 20th, 2024, the case was dismissed under Utah's Governmental Immunity Act, but not before a judge acknowledged, on the record, that the case met the threshold to suggest the officer's conduct may have contributed to Gabby's death. The Petitos vowed to appeal, not just for their daughter, but for every future victim failed by law enforcement systems, built on loopholes and discretion. In February of 2025, Gabby's parents sat down for an interview with ABC. It wasn't about press tours or legal updates. It was personal. A chance to tell their daughter's story in their own words, not through headlines or filtered Instagram posts. They talked about the Gabby they knew. Kind, radiant, funny, a light. They described the last time they saw her, how she gave them a long, tight hug goodbye, started crying, and couldn't explain why. That moment haunts them. They opened up about red flags that they now see in hindsight. The way Brian isolated Gabby from friends, family, jobs. The manipulation, the controlling behavior, the name-calling. They read from Gabby's own texts and handwritten letters. Messages where she begged Brian to stop calling her names, told him he was hurting her, asked him to stop trying to control her. But at the time, no one called it abuse. They even recounted a chilling moment before the road trip when they asked Brian to keep Gabby safe. "I will," he told them. And then he didn't. The interview revisited the Moab police stop, the body cam footage, the officers who saw Gabby crying, heard the witness say Brian had been hitting her, and still concluded she was the primary aggressor. One of the officers even warned, "This is why the law takes away discretion, because women end up dead." That moment, the one where everyone could have done something and didn't, is where everything changed. They addressed Brian's notebook too. the so-called confession where he claimed Gabby's death was an act of mercy. Her parents reject that entirely. The coroner confirmed what they already knew. Gabby was beaten and strangled, and Brian's words were a lie. A final act of manipulation from a man who could not control himself, and then couldn't live with what he did. They made no attempt to feign forgiveness. They didn't sympathize with Brian. They called him a liar, a coward. They said they wished he had lived long enough to face trial. And they did not hold back about the Laundrie family either, accusing them of complicity, saying they raised a coward and now had to live with that truth. But in the end, they turned their heartbreak into something bigger. They've received messages from survivors, people who've said that hearing Gabby's story gave them the strength to leave abusive relationships, to save themselves before it was too late. And in Gabby's memory, her family created the Gabby Petito Foundation. Its mission? To support missing persons cases and help domestic violence victims escape. They ended the interview with a message that Gabby is still here. Not physically, but in spirit. That she's watching over them, that she's guiding them, and that everything they do now, they do for her. Gabby Petito's story didn't end with a notebook confession or a press conference. It didn't end with a settlement or even with a funeral. The reality is, her story lives on, not just as a symbol of grief, but as a call to action. It's a brutal and all too common story of intimate partner violence, one where the person she loved became the person who ended her life. Her murder forced millions to confront a simple, horrifying truth. Abuse doesn't always come with a black eye. Sometimes it comes with apologies, with isolation, with long hugs and unexplained tears. And sometimes it comes too late to stop. The Gabby Petito Foundation was born out of that truth, out of a family's grief that didn't just sit in silence. The foundation has taken a proactive stance against domestic violence, channeling resources into the hands of survivors and helping families search for their missing loved ones. It funds immediate, tangible assistance. It amplifies search efforts. And it pushes for something we still don't talk about nearly enough: preventative education. Root causes, system failures, all of it. The organization isn't afraid of big goals. They don't just want to respond to violence, they want to stop it from happening in the first place. That means public awareness campaigns, improved training for law enforcement, and a better understanding of how to recognize coercive control before it escalates into tragedy. But Gabby's case also highlighted something else, something uglier about how we consume these stories. Her disappearance sparked global headlines, national media frenzies, candlelight vigils, social media sleuthing, hashtags. And meanwhile, hundreds of other missing persons, especially Indigenous women and people of color, received little to no coverage at all. Over 700 Indigenous individuals were reported missing in the same region Gabby disappeared between 2011 and 2020. The disparity wasn't subtle. It was glaring. The phenomenon has a name: missing white women syndrome. And while Gabby's father, Joseph Petito, initially struggled with the term, he's since acknowledged its painful accuracy, and now uses his and his family's platform to demand better. Through the foundation and through projects like Faces of the Missing, he's working to level the playing field, to make sure every missing person gets the attention they deserve, because no family should have to beg for coverage, and no child should vanish into silence. Gabby Petito was not a headline. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend. She was a young woman who loved deeply and lived out loud. And while the world may never fully heal from what happened to her, the least we can do is ensure her death wasn't in vain. We remember her not just for how she died, or how her murder was solved by social media, but for how she lived, and for what comes next. Gabby Petito's final footprint has yet to be stamped. Her legacy and memory will bring change.